the Mars flying around and doing whatever it did. Our story tonight is how we got the Hawaii Mars from Patricia Bay, where it had landed after 2 years of work with the Colson Aviation there, and then how we got it to the museum. So that in itself is a significant story. The story of how Colson Aviation got the aircraft refurbished after it hadn't flown for 8 years, and then the Philippine earlier this year hadn't flown for 12 years. That's their story, and they're doing I think they're spending about $1 million of doing a documentary on that. So that's not our story from the BC Aviation Museum, although there are interesting stories for sure. This projection here just shows the history of the Mars aircraft, and of course it was made by the Glenn L. Martin Company, and they named all the aircraft with M's. The M130, which was the China Clipper, the Martin Marauder, the Martin Maryland, the Martin Mercator, and it goes on and on. That was just the way they did things. But this was the Mars, and of course it was designed as, believe it or not, initially as a patrol bomber, and by the time they were testing it, they said, oh, that's obsolete, it's too big. So they said, easy to convert it into a passenger, troop transport type aircraft. And so what happened was, these were built all during the Second World War, and then they operated, but they didn't really operate during the Second World War. They were basically finished at the end of it. And then from 1945 to 1956, they flew the San Diego, San Francisco, Hawaii run for the American Navy, back and forth, without many problems other than that one right there, which is a bit catastrophic. They retired them, but in 1956, you think about that now, they're already flying Boeing 707s and things like that. And they said, okay, it's time to retire these. And they sat at Alameda, if you know what I'm talking about, in San Francisco Bay, at Alameda Naval Air Station for 3 years, and they're going to scrap them. And a consortium known as the Forest International Flying Tankers, Forestry International Flying Tankers, Forest Industries Flying Tankers, they went down and they bought the four remaining aircraft out of the 7 that were originally built for them. And they said, we're going to convert these to water bombers. Now, I don't know if you know of how aerial firefighting started. A number of years ago, I had tested here on Vancouver Island, dropping 5-gallon paper bags full of water onto a fire. And you wouldn't think that was very effective. It wasn't. The water evaporated, whatever. So he said we could do it with ice, because then the ice will melt, it'd be better. They wound up killing one of the firefighters on the ground. He got hit by it, and they went, we're not doing this anymore. So they experimented with a smaller aircraft called the Grumman Goose, and they built this scooping system, and it worked. So they said, we're going to take 4 of these aircraft, fly them up to Victoria, and have them converted by ferry aviation right on the Victoria airfield, and use them as water bombers. So it was a new concept. So 4 came up to Victoria in about early 1960. It's voice activated.
Just press the enter key.
Come on, return. No, it's not working. Here we go.
Press enter.
Just press the
Press enter key, John said.
Just press the enter key.
Do you think I can see that?
I think we all commiserate with that.
One in the middle.
That's one I'm pressing. Well, as John comes up, sorts this out, I'll continue the verbal narrative. So they had the 4 aircraft come into Victoria to be converted, and the first one converted was then lost up in Nanaimo in 1961. Guys went into a valley on a fire. Remember that? It's quite new to the aircraft. They went in, and the aircraft can scoop 60,000 pounds of water in 25 seconds. Okay, you know these Canadair Super Scoopers that you saw maybe operating? They can do 12,000 pounds in about 25 seconds as well. So it's 4.5 times the capacity. These guys went in to do their drop, and it didn't drop. Okay, there's a malfunction in the drop mechanism, and now it was a 100,000-pound airplane with the 60,000 pounds of water, 160,000 pounds. They couldn't get out, and it killed all 4 guys. Crash. It was tragic. Then in 1963, I think they were still working on, I think it was the Caroline Mars, and a Hurricane Frida came through, flipped the aircraft, smashed it, broke it up, and they went, it wasn't recoverable. So they're down to 2 airplanes. The Hawaii Mars and the Philippine Mars. And the FIFT used them for 44 years safely, putting out fires all around BC. They were then sold to the Colsons in 2007, and they used them for a few years, and then they had them parked at the bomber base on Sprout Lake for many, many years, trying to sell them. Okay, there were no buyers because a very famous multi-millionaire aviation enthusiast, his name is Kermit Weeks, he came up and had a look at it and went, "You got to be kidding how much fuel this uses." So they were by then, like now they're 81 years old, they're obsolete, they're so heavy on the maintenance, and so heavy you can't even buy the fuel anymore. It's very difficult. Just for the flight to get the Hawaii Mars to Victoria, they had to get a tanker of fuel from Alberta. So. Here we go. So, on August 11th last year, the Hawaii Mars came to Victoria with a lot of fanfare, and this is just one of the many international aviation magazines around the world that has covered it. And has it made a big impact on us? Oh, it has. It has doubled our visitorship and has doubled our revenue, and we have people from all over the world, literally all over the world, coming to see us. So it's been a great success in that. Okay, how did we get here? Well, there was a lot of preparation done up at Sprout Lake. There was 2 years of negotiations with the Colson group, and we were up for a taxi test one day, and we're kind of goofing around on top of the wing here, and we're going, we're going to get it. It took a long time to convince the Colsons that we were serious about this, and I said, yeah, we are. So I was the president, and this fellow here, Richard Mosdell, was the project leader of that, and we all had a lot of various duties to carry out to make this work. We're a small museum. And I just came back from an Aviation Museum's conference in Ottawa last week, and the theme of my presentation was how a small museum can pull off a really big project, and it was very well received. Okay, so there we are, just goofing around on the top. And August 11th, the Hawaii Mars arrives in the company of the Snowbirds. One of our guys said, let's call it the Snowbirds. I said, they're in Abbotsford. And that'll never work. Okay, yeah, it sure did. His name was Dan Dempsey, and he was a former leader of the Snowbirds. So he had very, very good connections. But what's interesting is these aircraft, and of course I flew the Tudor when I went through flying training. In fact, even flew with the Snowbirds just as a guest one day. Very interesting. Is that the maximum speed of the Mars was pretty close to the stall speed of the of the Snowbirds here. And Peter Killen, who was the pilot, he said, "Oh no, it's nice and smooth." You know, he's being interviewed. Yeah, and I said, "Peter, come on." He says, "That thing was about shaking itself to bits," because he'd never been that fast. 185 knots is what he was doing. But at the end of the fly past, which was witnessed by thousands of people. There's probably over 10,000 people there. And as he did his fly past, he then pulled up here like this. Well, the guys on the inside have to slow down on a formation. And they're going, "Don't slow down!" Right at it. The other thing is that the endurance of the aircraft of the Snowbirds is about an hour and 10 minutes. That's all you get. And so the timing had to be exactly correct for them to meet over Crofton. And of course, somebody gave him the wrong time, and I was talking to the leader of the Snowbirds that morning. He said, "No, you've got to be there at this time, and it all worked out in the end. So there was a multitude of challenges, and I'll be going through some of those challenges, and some of them were pretty funny.
It was a great flyby.
Yeah.
It was an
Great.
awesome flyby.
Wasn't it great? Well,
Yes.
I was quite surprised that they had a one-time ferry certificate, and that normally means from A to B. Well, they went all up to Powell River and around, and they flew all around Victoria. We figured 250,000 people saw it when it came. You have to understand that I was down on the VIP dock there, and with the Minister of Tourism, and when it went over, it was the only time I'd never heard when the snowbirds fly away that I couldn't hear them because the Mars was so loud. But what we did hear as it went in, you could hear the cheering, then you could hear all the crying. Oh, people were. I'm choking up. Okay, so that was a joke. Anyway, moving right along. So it touched down. The Mars touched down here, and you will see that we had a multitude of issues to deal with. The first one was we had to have a exclusion zone. So this is where the Mars was going to come in and land, because this is the Institute of Ocean Sciences and the Coast Guard base right here. And that's, of course, and leads right on to Victoria Airport. When we did a taxi test with them up in Sprout Lake, there were boats everywhere, like coming under the wing, and we went, oh, it was so dangerous, I couldn't believe it. RCMP boat came out and shooed them all away. So we said, we cannot have this, because when they come down and land, we want it down, safe, nobody hurt. And we had 13 boats, RCM SAR, indigenous boats. They could not help us more. They were absolutely wonderful, from about 4 or 5 different brands. And that's it. So we put out this, and we put out the notice to mariners and said, stay away. And there's about 300 boats out there in the Saanich Inlet wanting to see this. So this is where we're just taxiing. Peter Killam taxied it in, and we attached it to this buoy. We put this buoy here, which for some reason the Institute of Ocean Science says you can't do that. They said, yes, we can. Our on-scene ops director is a guy named John McManus, has a master's degree in oceanography, and also was the CO of the Sea King Squadron here some years ago, and he was a retired colonel, and he wasn't taking any guff. So we landed, and what we had to have for this to work was we had to have a high tide that lasted about 8 hours. It had to be daylight and zero wind. Okay, we're not asking much, right? And that was our window, and there was only 2 days that could happen. And the weather was, everything was just coming together beautifully. It was all arranged, and Institute of Ocean Sciences issues a stop work order. We went, what? Because we had to bring it up their slipway onto their major parking lot. That was the only way that we could get the aircraft to the museum. There was no other possible way. And just to give you an idea, the Nichol brothers are a house moving company. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah.
No relation, but I certainly would like some of their profit. But they, so professional. And these guys, as we surveyed the whole area down at the Coast Guard base, they said, yeah, it should work. I said, that means nothing. Yeah, it looks good. I said, that means nothing. It's either a yes or a no. And we have about 12 criteria here. Is it gonna work? And if it's not a yes, then it's a no, then the project's over. It was that simple. That was even well before we got to this stage here. And everything ticked off, which meant 150 cars moved, lampposts coming down, fences coming down, indigenous boats and their fish trays, whatever they call it, moved, and so many things had to all come into this confluence where it was going to work. And then with previous, they said no, and they said we want a 3-month environmental study because you're going to drag the boat up this ramp. It was World War II ramp, and it'll be salt water. We said, well, you bring boats up here all the time. You know, this is different. And you have saltwater, fresh, you have a separator there in your drainage system. Oh, it doesn't matter. So that was a problem. And the other thing they said is, you don't have permission from the indigenous bands to do this, and we did. So it was crazy. So what do you do when we got this airplane sitting in the salt water out here, and we have this stop work order? Who do you call? Prime Minister's office. And through the Minister of Tourism to the Premier, who phoned the provincial federal liaison office to the Prime Minister's office. 9 o'clock that night, I got a call. Mr. Nichol, this is Emmerich Gill from the Prime Minister's office. Don't worry, you can start your operation at 5:30 tomorrow morning. And if you ever have any other problems, here is my personal mobile number. You call me right away. Yeah, I mean, this happens all the time, so. And guess what? Next morning, and off we went. So here's where it really gets interesting. The problem was, there are 2 breakwaters here, and it was impossible to bring the Mars in like this. So we said, well, why can't we push it sideways? Well, you know what, like pushing sideways on a boat. You're not a boat people, you know, you do this all the time. So we had a pusher and then a counter pusher on the other side, and it was tethered bow and stern, and there was very little room. Now this is interesting. Once it got onto the buoy, that was, to get the aircraft onto the buoy, that was the Colson's responsibility. And they did a wonderful job. They looked after the aircraft, and it was in good shape. We're very pleased. But they said, once it got onto the buoy, they said, we're not touching this with a 10-foot barge pole, because they'd never done anything. They said, in fact, one of them said, the director said, that's impossible. I said, but we have the Nichol brothers, they can do anything. And they did. And so, here we go. So very, very carefully, you know, we even cut down these pylons here, and then as soon as it went by, then re-welded them and up they went. So it was a huge operation. Now, can you see this? It doesn't even show the whole thing. Oh, sure, here we go. Can you see the outline of the aircraft here? Oh, okay, good. So you can see that we had these anchor points all the way through, and it had to be tethered. It had to have 2 points of tether all the time, plus the pushing boat and then the restricting boat. I don't know what the right words for that would be. And it had to be like Mars yoga to get it through. Very close. That's why we had to have 0 wind and a high tide. And then eventually, and this is the slip ramp right here, and then it was going to go right here. So very, very tight tolerances. Well, Colson's could not believe that this would work. And we tried and tried, and we said, look, and so he said, well, maybe we can display it in a different way to help you understand. So there's airbags, and you know, there's people along these breakwaters, and so anyways, I thought that was very funny how the Nichol brothers drew that out for him. Look, here's how it's going to work. So, and it did. John, can you even see that? There's. Okay, there we go. So, here we go. It went well.
You see how high that tail is out the water?
Oh, this is not a small airplane. But you can see it's starting to get later in the day because this took hours to do. So what is it, maneuvering into position with the high tide? And hey, now we're lined up with the slipway. I'll tell you, we're getting really, really optimistic about all this right now. And there was a lot of people down there helping, okay? The Colsons call this dewatering. I would call it beaching, but okay, I mean, they have way more experience on this, with this than I do. And so there it is. And you can see the slipway, it's old and it's pretty narrow. We had to take off all these 5,000-pound concrete blocks that were all along the side here. In the end, we didn't need to do that, but that was just a little bit of extra insurance. And what happened next here? we got stuck on a rock. We said, what? What on earth is happening? It wouldn't go forward and it wouldn't go back. I went, you gotta be kidding. Because we'd surveyed everything underneath, you know, went down there at low tide and looked at everything. Says, yeah, we're gonna be good here. So, these Nichol brothers go, okay. Well, you can't see here, but there was a tugboat, a small tugboat, a guy that was helping us. And he went around attached to the bow, and now if you put it on front of the Mars, and there's the breakwater, there wasn't a lot of room there, and apparently he went up to 75% power, whatever the equivalent of that. The thing popped off, and of course he went, oh, okay, stop in a hurry, and it came off. And we went, that was a tense about hour and a bit. And then it started, then it came up. I guess we just moved it a number of inches to one side because there's only about 4 or 5 inches on either side coming up this slipway. And it came up easy peasy. Now, we have these huge trucks that had 6 5,000-pound concrete blocks on them just to weight the aircraft, just to weight the truck down, so it could actually pull this aircraft, which now weighs about just over 100,000 pounds. But oh, they're very tight tolerances. And so it just squeezed up.
Question, what's it coming out on? Is it a dolly or its own wheels or?
So what, a great point, and I should have mentioned that earlier. Yeah, we'll see pictures of it later on. It has beaching gear. So when it's out in the water, the Colson, they had their flight team, their dock team, and then their boat team. They were all excellent. What a great bunch of guys. And what you do is you float out this beaching gear, and with these pinion, I don't know what you call it, you slide it in and lock it into position while it's out in the water. So then you tow it in, and then it just comes up. Flying boats are not convenient, but what you do is by not having that gear, by not having internal undercarriage, landing gear, it gives you all sorts of extra capacity and reduces a lot of weight. So this aircraft could never fly, well, it could never land on a runway other than once.
Yeah.
So, and then what would you do with it? It never moved. Okay, so there we go, close tolerances. And this is the truck
Oh, yeah.
that they used. They had to have it weighted down. Of course, we asked kindly for the 150 Coast Guard workers to please move their cars, which they had done a month before. So, you know, things were going along well, other than that stop work order, which was just bizarre.
How many trucks? Just the one, or did they?
To pull out just the one. Yeah, the one was enough. So here we are, just pulling it up. I just did a quick panel. I think, does this look like concrete blocks there that we've taken off the side of the slipway? And of course, this lamppost did not survive. No, that had to come down, and then we had a welding team that put it up. Like within 10 minutes, they were welding it back up to get in shape. So we had a lot of people involved. I'll talk about that later. As we're towing the aircraft up this slipway, there's this high-tech Royal Canadian Navy instrumented building here, because they have 4 buoys out there where they do sound checks on them. So they run their equipment and then they say, you know, this equipment's too loud and things like that, because, you know, in the anti-submarine world, which I did for 12 years, track Russian nuclear submarines, it's all about being quiet, and even the ships. So anyways, as it came up, it was going to take out this very high-tech building here, and he even said, well, as long as you just smash the front of it, we're okay. But don't take out all the electronics and stuff inside. So this is Tim Nichol here. This is, there's no space, distance here. This is exactly where it was. And what he said was, I said to him, Tim, we're gonna hit this building. And he goes, no problem. He just went down, they just jacked up one of the one of the beaching gear, put in 3 sheets of plywood. Well, it moved it about this far up, but at the wingtip, it moved it 4 feet higher. So these guys, nothing was too difficult for these guys. Calm, professional, whatever. There we go. And they were, at the end of the day, we're going, ah. So, I asked, no, his uncle was also working in there, who took over the whole project. And I said, a difficulty level from 1 to 10, how difficult was this? He goes, 5.5. He said, the week before they'd been moving on the Fraser, right, you know, as it comes into Vancouver there, they had a floating 90 foot by 90 foot building that they had 2-inch clearance on either side. And he said, just went right in. These were the guys, they had done some work for us before, and we were very, very pleased with them. So, there it is, what have we got here? Yeah, we made it easy peasy. Somebody forgot to chalk the wheels. And it started to roll down. And one of the guys threw in some blocks in front of it and say, don't say anything about this. That would have been an absolute calamity, but hey, we saved it. You know, you can have 1,000 things that you have to do right, and if you miss 2, sometimes it can cause problems. Now, these are just old tractor tires that were used to beach the aircraft, because it's not like you can go onto Amazon and get you know Mars beaching gear tires. It doesn't work. And I'll come back to that later because it does have an effect. This is what it looks like at low tide, and there is no way we could have brought it in, and it had to be a high tide, or whether it was a spring tide or a neap tide, I can't remember. But and of course the water was well up to here, and so that worked for us. The date, it all came together perfectly, and so we're extremely pleased with how that worked out. So now, you cannot tow the aircraft on its beaching gear. I mean, you can for just very short time, but if one of these tires loses its inflation, the whole thing will go clunk like this. Also, if you're going to tow it, you'd have to tow it tail first. It doesn't fit out of the Coast Guard site. We had to do it right wing first, and that caused a lot of work. But we knew about this. So what the Nichol brothers did was they built a bespoke transporter. So they did the tail wheel first. It took them 5 days to build the transporter. Okay, 5 days. You can see with the girders going in. Oh, by the way, this is the beaching gear for the tail wheel. Okay, so then the main gear started to come up, and they just kept them building with blocks slowly. Then you see building it under the hull. We had to measure the center of gravity of the aircraft within a centimeter, because when we're bringing it out this way, we didn't want it to rock and fall on its tail or go over on its nose. So that was all done very, very carefully. And actually, as a flyer, that's things I've done that many times, but not with this particular aircraft. And I think here's a good picture. You can see the floats that for the beaching gear here, and then how it just goes right in there into the hull. Okay. What do I got here? And once again, it's still building up the transporter. They're still working on it. Then the main girders are moved in, and they're welded, and they're drilled, and they had great big bolts, and they had it very, very secure. But once again, we had to know exactly where that center of gravity was. Now the wheel trucks are brought in. You have to understand is, I flew for 43 years, and I've been around big equipment, and jumbo jets and Boeing 777s. I have absolutely no experience in what these guys did. and they were just amazing. Did I tell you that I like the Nichol brothers?
Once or twice, yeah.
Very impressed. So now the moving starts. Now here it is. Here it is on the transporter. I know you can't see this, John, but here's a transporter up like this. We've attached this, the starboard pontoon onto this poster, which they've, this structure here, which they built up as part of the transporter. And on it we had the insurance company that was sponsoring us. So slow, careful progress. You see, so it's going out right wing first, and some of our clearances were just like a couple meters. It was really close, but it worked. And here we go. What does that say? Oh yeah, across the Coast Guard base, and I've got a couple good graphics here. This is the way we brought it out. This was the only way to do it. There's only one option, because even though there is a seaplane base here, the airport had built just the way we wanted to bring it in, but they built some embedded landing lights. So great big concrete stanchions, and it was virtually impossible. We had little models and seeing how we can make it work. It was never going to work. So we're going to take it came off the slipway here, across the Coast Guard base, across the seaplane base. This is the indigenous boats area here. Fences were coming down here, out past this seaplane hangar, and then up across West Saanich Road and onto the airport lands. So this is a true scale of the transporter and the aircraft. Okay, so you can just see how absolutely huge this was. And of course, and then it was attached here for greater stability. The Nichol brothers, they made up, they know how to do this. They made up all these to scale drawings, and from above, it looked like this. So here's the truck, this rig here and down there, that's the transporter, and look at the plane. So I'm going, I've said it before, I love you guys. Okay, let's go here. Now, it was that tight. It was that tight. Everything was laser measured. They had a contingency plan to take down a big hydro pole here, which they really did not want to do, because that was going to cause a lot of disruption. And they said, what we can do is we can take this truck and we can go across this ditch here. And I said, but it's a ditch. And they go, so? And when the trucks in, they got a crane and they put all these massive steel pads down, and they just towed it straight across there. I went, you guys are incredible. Nothing seemed to faze them. So when we, so this is crossing West Saanich Road, and I said, I'm just going to stay out of this operation, because I was just doing overall sort of compliance with a whole bunch of things, oversight, and I just blocked this pathway here, because people were starting to ride their bikes through here. Oh, this looks interesting. This actually is not all that safe, but the fence here was cut down. This is security fence. So as soon as it went through, the fencing guys are right there and putting up the fences. There was a fence down just between the Coast Guard base and the seaplane base, and I went down to see that it was down. It was already up. It took the guys 20 minutes or half an hour, and they got right on it. So, but this was essential. Our biggest friend throughout this operation was the Victoria Airport Authority. They were absolutely wonderful. We would say, can you help us? What do you need? What do you need? And this will come up a little bit later as well. Absolutely fantastic. And of course, building relationships was really, really important for this whole project. So now we're on to the airport. It took 5 days to get that transporter, or that aircraft onto the transporter. It took 3 hours to get it across the airfield. It took another 5 days to get it off the transporter. So it was very meticulous. There we go. Well,
Question,
yes, sir.
did you have a bit of fun pulling it uphill?
It was not even a problem.
No?
The truck they had was just so powerful. They had all the best gear. But, you know, there were some delays at the beginning and it wound up getting dark. So they towed it across the airfield with the permission of the Victoria Airport Authority and Air Traffic Control. They continued their normal operations. So if you were flying in that night, you look out the window and go, what on earth is going on here? It was good. Not only that, they said, are there any drone pilots here? Okay. The federal law is you cannot fly a drone within 5 miles of an airfield. The risk to aviation is just too much. And I said, yeah, if you wanna fly your drone around the tail, just keep it to the south of the active runway. I mean, you got to be kidding. So, but they said, yeah, it's good. And so what does it say? It says all night operations continued, and let's just see. Yes, and then these are all my own pictures, by the way. I was just taking clips. And so there's the museum. They had all these big lights up here. By the way, we had to build a new roadway to bring the airplane in. What you can't see is all the Prosecco corks popping right now. Oh yeah, we had a party. We said this, because this was a culmination of actually about 2.5 years of work. So, who paid for it? I'm getting to that, you know, and that is an interesting story in its own right. So, it's positioned here at BCAM. We deconstructed the transporter, and very happy Prez. And then we just towed it into position. Now, I'll just check and see here. Oh, okay, well, just in case you haven't seen inside the aircraft, has 22 water tanks in it. We've now blocked all this off, because we had when people got in there quite enthusiastic. We had an enthusiastic photographer, quite a big guy. We'd open up the top of one of these tanks, and he just about went into it. But he'd still be there now. And so it's just too dangerous to allow anybody, because that the crew members would just kind of hop along the side and over all the tanks and things like that. But I said for visitors, we just cannot do that. Our liability would be just too much. And it's just looking aft into the tail. Just a few pictures. A very kind of a funky cockpit that Wayne Coulson's wife had designed the colors and all that. When we got it, we had to de-oil and defuel the aircraft. You can't, because especially the fuel, this high octane fuel is explosive. So we did that. It was all drained out, and then we said, since the Coast Guard base would not allow us to wash the airplane on their facility, we said, okay, we'll do it here. Well, we called up the airport firefighters. Hey, do you guys want to? Oh, we didn't finish the sentence, and they were there. 350 people were involved in this project, directly or indirectly. Every single one of them has received a certificate of appreciation. I know, because I did them all. So there's some of the doors there, and now we're open to the public. What has changed from this picture is a number of things. We now have a set of modular stairs, they're very wide, and they're absolutely beautiful. You can come in this side, you look through the bottom, the lower level, you look through the upper level, and then you can walk through the other side, and the modular stairs will take you out. Underneath the wing, you just do a nice walk out front, and you get up to the cockpit, and then stairs down from there. When we got the aircraft, I said, okay, guys, we had these 5,000-pound blocks, these concrete blocks. We had 8 of them, with 40,000 pounds. Well, the aircraft can lift 60,000 in 25 seconds. It is a low-speed, high-lift wing, and we're at the if you're familiar with angle of attack, I'm sure you are,
Take off.
it was optimum for a maximum lift. And I said, we gotta have spoilers. So we put all sorts of spoilers on it. And 3 days after we put those up, we had a big November windstorm, and it didn't move. Now, why I was motivated to do that years ago when I was in the Air Force, I was numerous times up in Keflavik, Iceland, and outside the officers' quarters, there was this, it was called an F-102 Delta Dagger, Delta wing aircraft on a plinth. And boy, it blew that night. It blew that night, and because it's really windy there in Keflavik. And came out in the morning, and it was gone. And I said to, there was a sergeant coming down the road, I said, hey, Sergeant, hey, it was a good idea to take that down before the storm last night. And he goes, no, sir. That airplane took off on its own and flew 300 yards down that. That's an airplane that doesn't rotate until 160 knots. Okay, so it was it was quite a deal. So I said, we've really got to get spoilers onto these wings here, and we do. And so I'm going to go back. This is a joke. A new hangar. So who paid for it? We paid for it. We gave Colson's $500,000 to refurbish the aircraft and to deliver it to the buoy in Patricia Bay. We said that will be our contribution. And then now we are seeking what they call Heritage Canada Status B for the Mars and for our museum, and which they will be able to give the Colsons a very large tax receipt, much more than we could have. It'll be, in the millions of dollars, but we couldn't do that because we're not a big enough museum. But as far as paying for it, we shamelessly courted the Minister of Tourism, Lana Popham, thanks very much. And she got, we're very lucky because an election was coming. And she could use all of this for her own, getting a lot of electioneering going on. We contacted the papers, the radios, the TV, and even documentary. I've done 39 interviews all about this. So we really, really went for the media, and we really went for the public, saying this is a really emotional, iconic aircraft for so many people. It saved, well, Sheila was saying how it saved them. What year was that?
89.
89. So it's so well known at BC, we said we have to save this aircraft and have it stay in British Columbia. We do not want it to go to the States where we'll never see it again. It's done, the vast majority of it's flying up here in British Columbia. So from the provincial government, we had got $250,000. Okay, well, that's small change to the refurbishment budget for the BC Royal British Columbia Museum, which is going to be what, $780 million. But still, it helped us because, that pushed us over the line to say we could do it. The total cost was $887,000 to our museum to get it from Sprout Lake to the museum. And since then, we've got another small federal grant also of $250,000. So where we are with the Mars and it all set up, we're at the same budget level as we were before we started the project. So that worked out very, very well. So what's next? A new hangar? Absolutely. There's an aerial shot. You can see the Mars right there in our hangar. The hangar is way too small. At this we couldn't even possibly even come close to fitting it in. So what we're looking at is a much bigger hangar right here. That's bigger than, it'll fit the Mars, and it'll fit, actually a Lancaster will fit under one of its wings. And we're restoring a Lancaster bomber, if you didn't know. And that's, it's just ballpark, $30 million. Thank you for your generous donations. So this is going to take a lot of work, and I'm just in the process of developing what we call our case statement about how we're going to go to the governments and industry and to family foundations about, to get money.
So question.
Yep.
Did you lend or give an engine from that plane to the Philippine Mars when they were having issues?
To answer you strictly, ma'am, no, we did not. We gave 4.
Okay.
We gave them all. We gave them propellers, engines, APUs, batteries, fire extinguishers, basically everything. As long as they replaced them with something that looked aesthetically exactly the same. So we have 4 engines that won't work, and we gave them 4 engines that will work to get the Philippine down to. Although they didn't need all 4, they wanted them all, but that was part of our contract. Somebody said they're going to make a dragster. And I went, the engines weigh 3,000 pounds, so I can't see that.
I
Yes, sir.
assume they made a contribution to the building in future?
Colson's?
For the, no, not Colson's, the museum that got the Mars engines to bring their plane down to them. Are they contributing to our museum to build a new one?
I think I'm going to call them tomorrow morning.
I think we should. Where else were they gonna get those engines?
That's a problem, and you can get, it's called a Wright 3,350 cubic inch, and we used to do 18-hour patrols with those engines on the Argus, and we come back, we're all deaf. I mean, it was terrible. Anyways, we've done up a concept model of what we'd like to do. Interesting, at this Aviation Museum's conference in Ottawa last week, every museum had the same problem. Not enough space, not enough money. Well, so we were hardly unique for that. We were just about the smallest museum represented there. Hopefully, we'll get it, you know, figure about 72,000 square feet. Like I say, put the Mars in, put the other airplanes around, but it's not just about airplanes. Quite honestly, it's about edutainment is the word that came up in this this conference. So you educate, but you entertain people at the same time. And some of the museums have just unbelievably interesting programs going on right now.
How do you move the Mars from where it is into this,
Building around.
into the hangar?
We'll call them, so the question is, how are we gonna move the Mars from where it is now into the new hangar? We'll call the Nichol brothers. I don't know, but.
I thought maybe we're just gonna leave it where it is and then build the hangar over it.
Well, you know, but we've looked at all sorts of ideas, you know, that's one. And in fact, one of the ones we were talking about, let's put one of these inflatable and structures over it. And the VAA is our best friend right now. And they said, absolutely not. No more temporary structures on the airfield. So, and I said, okay, because they do look crummy after just a few years. So, and okay, so we've come to the end. There should be lots of questions. I left so much stuff out. Sir, right here.
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Wayne. I'll go.
What's a proposed time frame to get a shelter over for?
So it will be a full hangar facility with, you know, archives and a reading room, and the restoration shop will probably stay where it is, and all classrooms, and you know, we've been talking about putting in a commercial kitchen, and you know, this is all blue sky things. But what's the timeline? The soonest, if everything clicked perfectly, would be 5 years. But think 5 to 7 years. Yes, sir.
So when you're finished, it's gonna be what, a 2/3 size version of Evergreen Museum? Down in the States where the spruce goose is, they've got that inside a building?
Well, you know, I've been down there. By the way, one of my hobbies is go around aviation museums around the world.
Likewise.
Yes, I went down there and I had a good talk with him. Before we even started this project, I said, how do you manage this massive flying boat that you have? Because they're 320-foot wingspan.
That's right.
We're 200-foot wingspan, so you're right, it's 2/3. And what was your original question?
Well, just one, you've seen the museum.
Yes.
It's an impressive layout. I believe they've got the spruce goose in there horizontally,
Yes.
not nose high, which requires a taller building, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So
What they did is that they dug out the foundation,
Ah.
and so it actually set it down
Yes.
as though it's sitting on the water. We don't want to do that,
Okay.
because, you know, the aircraft is quite a bit smaller than the the HK or the H1 Hercules or Spruce Goose. Because we want to see people to see the whole hull and just to see how massive it is. By the way, in the new museum, one of our very strong themes that we want to carry out is to have a firefighting themed museum. So you can go into a simulator and go in on the Mars and drop a load of water and and all these things. So believe me, we have an ideas basket like this high, and but that's one of them. One of the proposals from somebody I cannot name said, why don't you just build a structure over it and surround it with slot machines? How about a couple brass poles? I don't. We just absolutely not. So there's this balance that has to be maintained with. Do you have entertainment and spectacle over superseding education?
Yeah.
And believe me, we had a whole day talking about that just last week. So you try to find that right balance, because when you find out that one of the German museums said 81% of teenage boys play video games. I said, okay, I haven't played a video game in over 30 years. And 58% of girls, teenage girls, play video games. And I went, okay, so you have to be so innovative in your thinking and say, well, what can we do that will attract them? And then say, well, here's what it was like being in this aircraft. And people like getting into airplanes and seeing what they're like, and especially if you can do simulators. By the way, we do have a moving simulator down at the museum now, and it's becoming very popular. Single seat, so you can land an F-18 at the Victoria Airport. So, or crash it, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know anything about planes, honestly, but I've done a number of field trips to like Boeing and things like that. Was there ever an option with those planes of removing the wings?
For us, this one, no, everything was predicated on affordable cost. So we could have probably taken 2 weeks and have the wing removed, like they did down in Arizona when it landed at Lake Pleasant. Whoever said that, thank you very much. Lake Pleasant, and they took it all apart. But we don't even know who bought the Philippine Mars. We think it's actually the Mars Bar Company, the chocolate bar company. that did it. But Colsons are very, very tight-lipped about everything they do. So we often, even when it came to working with us, we would often say, what's happening? And we get a call that morning, oh, we're gonna be there in a couple hours. But did we think about it? Yes, we did, and very quickly realized it would have doubled our budget or tripled it. So it was much easier just to tow it through even with all those difficulties. But thank you, that was actually a great question. Ladies and gents,
Question, did you?
I think we're gonna go out and have to have a beer sometime.
Sorry.
Because
I'll talk to you later.
No, please.
I was just saying, did you, as an outright idea, consider landing it on the grass at the airfield with auxiliary supports under the wingtip float so it wouldn't? I'm
Yes,
just curious.
yes.
Yeah, I thought you might have.
And we frog marched that guy right out of the room.
You couldn't jack it up afterward?
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah.
It would close down the airport, and there's just so many things that could go wrong. We just absolutely not. But oh yes, but we actually considered that as an option. We looked at a lot of crazy things, like getting a massive helicopter to helicopter it over, but we went, nobody's got a helicopter that big.
Not even the Russians can.
Well, the Russians do, the Mi-12, but we're not talking to them. In fact, we have a Russian a Kamov 32 helicopter in our museum. We have 40 airplanes. And the VIH, Vancouver Island helicopters, came over desperate about a year and a half ago. Could you please store it, or else it's gonna have to be outside all winter? And we went, okay, because we don't have space. We managed to shoehorn it in. And the reason is, they have to replace their, overhaul their transmissions every 1,000 flying hours. Well, that's not a lot of time for a heli-laugered aircraft. And with the embargo because of the Ukraine-Russian war, they can't do it. They've run, all their aircraft, their time expired, and they virtually came begging us. But we said, you know, we're restoring another old helicopter on the other side of the museum. Perhaps you can come and help us with that.
Yeah.
No problem, I said.
Yeah.
So, but this is the way it works. It's a cooperation between industry and other museums. We're very much doing that, changing ideas for education and entertainment and swapping aircraft parts and things like that. You have to do it to stay alive. During COVID, some very entrepreneurial individuals, and not just south of the border, wound up buying up all these vintage aircraft parts and then selling them at 10 to 20 times the price. So it's made parts very, very difficult to get right now. Yeah. Lots more to tell. Yes, ma'am.
I'm hoping that you at some point have a video showing how that plane comes down and picks up all the water in 25 seconds.
The Colsons are making a very expensive documentary, which they're going to sell to Netflix and to Knowledge Network and wherever else they can. Once again, they don't tell us much about it, but just as the aircraft was coming to land in Patricia Bay, they had an aircraft called a T-33 with a $500,000 camera on its wing, and doing that, they hired that. I think that was, that cost them a lot of money to do that. So we're letting them make the documentary, and then we'll just get the warm glow of gratitude afterwards.
What's happening with the original seat from the aircraft?
The original seat?
Yeah, the original seat that presently sitting in the museum.
Correct.
In the main part.
Yep, that's right. It's in our Henderson hangar.
Yeah.
Well, it's just sitting there.
Oh, still,
So
okay,
it's a part of the static display before you take the tour out to the Mars.
okay,
So you can look at the engine and bits, and there's there's a whole bunch of paraphernalia there.
Yeah.
That makes a reasonable display, and that's where it is.
yeah, okay.
So-
I wondered if it had been altered yet.
No,
Okay,
no. So there's a question, especially when you're talking about Heritage Canada certifying the aircraft as a historical artifact, you can't change anything. So believe it or not, and when I was just in Ottawa, I was climbing through in an airplane called the B-24 Liberator. I say, do not even put your hand on this seat, because it's from the Second World War, because that will make an impression in the 80-year-old foam, and it's it's going to ruin it. It's going to detract from its authenticity as an artifact. And so a lot of things that we're doing there, we can't touch until we get the final word. So I've got another presentation if you're interested.
Dean, do you want to take 5 minutes break?
Sure. Oh, I'm not going to give another presentation unless you force me. But I was just joking about that. I was involved in saving a sailor mid-Atlantic back in 1980. But it's okay. Thank you very much for having me, folks. It's been a real delight. Come down and visit us at the BC Aviation Museum. We're a friendly bunch down there. That's it. That's an hour. That's it.